It was a very bizarre set of circumstances for them to be appearing to take a very somber and serious moment as a way to kind of, I don't know, put themselves back out there. It was very weird.
Prince Andrew is a lightning rod for controversy. Recently, a fake story claimed Buckingham Palace had confirmed a secret DNA test proving he fathered an unknown child, but they hadn't. The rumor went viral, racking up millions of views before anyone paused to verify it. What made the hoax so believable is that his real-life scandals are so shocking that almost any wild story about him feels plausible. So what really happened to this prince? And how did his actual actions destroy his reputation entirely? Join us as we get the facts straight on Prince Andrew's shocking secret. The unbelievable truth. The thumbnail told viewers everything they needed to know. Prince Andrew's face looked frozen in shock, his eyes wide under the heavy overlay of bold letters spelling out one sensational phrase: DNA confirmed. The video title suggested nothing less than a royal earthquake, Buckingham Palace releasing a statement, a secret child revealed, decades of hidden scandal suddenly dragged into the light. It was irresistible. Within hours, the story was gaining so much engagement across Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. The comment sections were filled with outrage, disbelief, and curiosity. To many viewers, it felt like a moment of history, unfolding in real time. Millions clicked because the plot was too explosive to ignore. The video spun a dramatic tale. According to the narration, a man named Alexander Campbell, a 42-year-old Scottish architect, learned on his mother's deathbed that Prince Andrew was his biological father. His mother, the story claimed, worked for a charity in the early 1980s and had a brief affair with Andrew before his marriage to Sarah Ferguson. Pregnant and pressured, she allegedly accepted a settlement and lived in silence for decades. The script grew darker. Campbell, said to be shaken by the revelation, filed a lawsuit demanding a DNA test. At first, Andrew refused, but the video insisted that under diplomatic security, he eventually provided samples that were transported to a genetics institute in Geneva. Scientists supposedly analyzed 21 genetic markers, returning a result with a 99.999% probability of paternity, mathematically irrefutable. Then came the supposed reaction from Buckingham Palace. A curt statement, only 2 lines long, was said to acknowledge a biological connection between the Duke of York and Campbell. The video claimed Andrew responded coldly. King Charles was distressed, and Prince William erupted in fury. Experts weighed in on inheritance issues, while royal historians compared it to Edward VIII's abdication crisis. The story had drama, detail, and a veneer of scientific authority. It had everything except one crucial element: truth. There is no Alexander Campbell, no Sterling Genetics Institute in Geneva handling secret royal samples, no DNA testing, no court case, no palace statement. None of it exists. The entire narrative was constructed from thin air, engineered to pull viewers in with the promise of scandal. Prince Andrew has 2 children, and only 2, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, both born during his marriage to Sarah Ferguson.
Again, the crowd roared its request. "What's that?" said the couple, as if they didn't know. Of course they did.
No secret son is waiting in the wings. Credible news outlets never touched the claim. The BBC, The Guardian, Reuters, CNN. None reported a word because there was nothing to report. No documents exist in public records. No legal filings appear in court systems. No official confirmation ever came from the palace. The entire claim lives only in viral videos and sensational posts designed to attract clicks and fuel speculation. The more interesting question isn't whether the story is real. It isn't. But why millions were so quick to believe it? Why did a fabricated tale, easily debunked, spread like wildfire across the internet?
A prince under pressure, an entourage keen to protect him from the inevitable questions.
Why did so many people crowd comment sections, convinced they were watching a royal cover-up collapse in real time? The answer lies in Prince Andrew's real controversies. His reputation is already so tarnished that people are prepared to believe the worst without hesitation. His long-standing friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, the accusations of sexual misconduct, the disastrous 2019 BBC Newsnight interview, and his eventual withdrawal from royal duties
Because in a sense, Amanda was me. She was the person behind the scenes.
have left him with almost no credibility. When someone's public image is damaged, fiction begins to feel indistinguishable from reality. The fake DNA story thrived because the ground was already poisoned. Audiences didn't need evidence. They only needed a headline that sounded like it could be true. Andrew's dealings in the past primed the public to expect disgrace. So when an outrageous claim surfaced, millions assumed it must be accurate. But what actually destroyed this prince's reputation so completely that millions would believe a baseless story without checking a single fact? I was at Pizza Express in Woking. In November 2019, the BBC's Newsnight program broadcast one of the most disastrous interviews in royal history. Prince Andrew walked into the studio, believing he could finally put to rest the allegations linking him to Jeffrey Epstein and Virginia Giuffre. He walked out with his reputation in ruins, his public role effectively over, and his name tied forever to a media debacle that stunned the world. The allegations were already serious. Virginia Giuffre accused Andrew of sexually assaulting her when she was just 17, having been trafficked by Epstein. A widely circulated photograph showed Andrew with his arm around Giuffre's waist, Ghislaine Maxwell grinning in the background. To the public, this image spoke volumes. To Andrew, it became the centerpiece of his defense. He insisted he had no recollection of ever meeting Giuffre.
Because I have absolutely no memory of that photograph ever being taken.
And even floated the idea that the photograph might be fabricated. Then came the explanations that would haunt him. Giuffre described Andrew sweating heavily during the alleged encounter. His rebuttal? He told Mateless he could not sweat at the time, claiming a medical condition caused by an adrenaline overdose during his service in the Falklands War in 1982. The excuse immediately collapsed under scrutiny. Medical specialists explained that such a condition, known as anhidrosis, arises from nerve damage, genetics, or specific medication, never from combat adrenaline. What was meant to sound scientific came across as absurd. If that wasn't enough, Andrew delivered what became the most ridiculed alibi in modern royal history. He insisted he could not have been with Giuffre on the date in question because he had taken his daughter to Pizza Express in Woking. The extreme specificity, intended to give his account credibility, had the opposite effect. Within hours, Pizza Express in Woking trended worldwide, becoming a symbol of flimsy defenses. Yet the real damage wasn't in the implausible details. It was the tone. For 45 minutes, Andrew displayed no sympathy for Epstein's victims.
And 97% of those 931 are still operating today, and they're still growing.
No acknowledgement of the suffering that had been exposed. Instead, he focused entirely on his own difficulties, the inconvenience of association, the toll on his reputation, the stress on his life. To viewers, he appeared tone-deaf, self-absorbed, and utterly detached from the human tragedy at the center of the scandal. His demeanor sealed the verdict. Viewers didn't see a man confronting serious allegations with humility. They saw arrogance, entitlement, and a staggering inability to understand public outrage. His body language conveyed irritation at being questioned, as though the interview was nothing more than a nuisance, rather than an opportunity to show accountability. The fallout was as expected. It was swift and brutal. Universities revoked honorary degrees, companies withdrew support, charities severed ties overnight. Even the palace could not contain the damage. Within 3 days, Buckingham Palace announced that Andrew would step back from royal duties indefinitely. The wording was polite, but the meaning was clear. This was exile.
And to reaffirm the statements which have already been made on my behalf.
His career as a working royal had ended in less than an hour of television. The cultural response was equally unforgiving. Late-night hosts and comedians mocked the interview endlessly. Memes flooded social media. "I can't sweat" and "Pizza Express Woking" became shorthand for unbelievable excuses. What Andrew thought would be his redemption turned him into a global punchline. Behind the scenes, Palace aides had warned him not to proceed. They predicted it would backfire spectacularly. But Andrew pushed forward, convinced he could explain himself. That confidence proved catastrophic. Before the interview, public opinion was divided. Some gave him the benefit of the doubt. After the interview, that doubt vanished. He had the chance to show empathy, acknowledge the gravity of trafficking and abuse, and separate himself morally from Epstein. Instead, he offered medical oddities and a fast food alibi. The Newsnight interview didn't just fail. It destroyed the last remnants of his credibility. It became a case study in how arrogance and poor judgment can turn a crisis into a career-ending catastrophe. He is royal. Why was he even in that position, facing allegations about Jeffrey Epstein, the billionaire pedophile and the clueless prince? During the 1990s, Prince Andrew was brought into the orbit of Jeffrey Epstein through Ghislaine Maxwell, the daughter of disgraced media tycoon Robert Maxwell. Epstein was a figure wrapped in mystery. He claimed enormous wealth, though the sources of his fortune were never clear. What was impossible to miss was the world around him: lavish parties, constant visits from influential figures, and a talent for placing himself at the center of power and attention on a global scale. Andrew slipped easily into this circle. He was seen at Epstein's Manhattan mansion, vacationing at the Palm Beach estate, and visiting the private Caribbean island that later became infamous. His name appeared in Epstein's flight logs, and multiple witnesses recalled him at gatherings where young women were frequently present. For Andrew, who was not the heir to the throne and often overshadowed within the royal family, Epstein's circle offered something rare: access to glamour, power, and a sense of importance beyond ceremonial duty. For years, Prince Andrew maintained a close friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, drawn to a world the strict royal environment could never offer.
I think Sarah and Andrew are together as a couple. I just don't think they could be apart from each other. And I do see them getting married again.
Epstein's circle promised freedom, glamour, and access to influential figures from around the globe. Andrew appeared at ease in this sphere, traveling on private jets, attending lavish gatherings, and moving effortlessly among politicians, celebrities, and business elites. It was a lifestyle far removed from royal protocol, offering excitement and social validation that formal duties could not provide. Then, in 2008, everything changed. Epstein pleaded guilty to soliciting prostitution from a 14-year-old girl, earning a criminal conviction and the label of sex offender. He served 13 months in a county jail, under conditions widely criticized for their leniency. For most, such a conviction would end any association immediately. But Andrew made a conscious choice to maintain the friendship, ignoring warnings, distancing himself from caution, and keeping contact long after a reasonable person would have severed ties. In December 2010, 2 years after Epstein's conviction, Andrew was photographed walking side by side with him in New York's Central Park. The images showed the Duke of York, then Britain's trade envoy, casually conversing with a registered sex offender. The scandal was immediate and severe. For a man representing British business and diplomacy, the optics were catastrophic. Andrew's attempt at explanation—
Prince Andrew, on the other hand, had grown up to simply expect it. He was a prince—
only fueled outrage. He insisted he had traveled to New York to end the friendship in person, but questions followed. Why end a friendship by staying at Epstein's mansion, attending his dinners, and strolling through Manhattan together? The defense collapsed under its own implausibility, yet Andrew repeated it for years. Behind the scenes, allegations were surfacing that made matters worse. Johanna Sjöberg, a Swedish woman, testified under oath that in 2001 Andrew groped her breast at Epstein's townhouse while she sat on his lap. She remembered every detail, but Andrew denied ever meeting her, dismissing the claims as false. But the testimony added to the mounting body of evidence linking him to troubling behavior within Epstein's circle. By 2019, when Epstein was arrested again on federal sex trafficking charges, Andrew's name returned to headlines worldwide. When Jeffrey Epstein died suddenly in a New York jail, officially ruled a suicide, but surrounded by questions and suspicion, the spotlight on his powerful connections grew even sharper. By that point, Prince Andrew's ties to Epstein could no longer be ignored.
For trade and investment, which essentially saw him traveling around the world representing Britain.
Journalists, advocacy groups, and the general public demanded answers. Instead of stepping back or offering genuine remorse, Andrew agreed to sit for the BBC Newsnight interview. What was meant to defend his reputation instead became a turning point, exposing missteps and plunging him into a crisis that would redefine his public life. Looking back, Andrew's friendship with Epstein was not a fleeting mistake. It was a sustained, conscious relationship with a man whose crimes were public knowledge. Despite warnings, despite scandal, despite common sense, he continued the association. That choice, more than any rumor or speculation, cemented his fall from grace. However, Epstein wasn't Andrew's first questionable associate. He was just the most destructive. How long is Andrew's list with questionable characters? Oligarchs, fixers, and the prince who loved shady money. Epstein wasn't Andrew's first controversial connection. For decades, he had a habit of forming relationships that raised eyebrows among diplomats, journalists, and insiders who were paying attention. During his time as Britain's trade envoy in the early 2000s, Andrew drew unusually close to figures most officials would avoid. He befriended Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, son of Libya's dictator, at a time when the country's human rights abuses were widely condemned. He went on exclusive hunting trips with oligarchs from Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan, nations notorious for authoritarian rule and corruption. These were not casual encounters. They were sustained, repeated interactions in private settings, far from oversight. WikiLeaks documents later revealed serious concerns about Prince Andrew's conduct as Britain's trade envoy. American diplomats described him as rude, highlighting his inappropriate defense of corrupt regimes and close ties to business figures connected to authoritarian governments. British officials reportedly struggled to control him, noting he frequently ignored protocol, prioritized personal relationships over official guidance.
Who as future king will have ultimate say over the future of the British monarchy and Andrew's role.
And acted in his own interests, rather than the country's. This pattern exposed the monarchy to ethical and political risk, illustrating how unchecked privilege and entitlement allowed Andrew to operate without accountability, undermining both his role and public confidence in the royal family. Then, there was the money. In 2007, Andrew sold his Sunning Hill Park home for £15 million to Timur Kulibayev, son-in-law of Kazakhstan's president. The property had been on the market for years at £12 million, with no buyers. Kulibayev paid $3 million over, asking for a house he never occupied, which eventually fell into disrepair. Critics suspected it was effectively a bribe disguised as a legitimate sale, though nothing was proven. Andrew's lifestyle consistently outstripped his official income. He received about £249,000 a year from the royal allowance, plus his Navy pension. Yet he maintained multiple properties.
You can, on occasions, get extremely lonely and isolated.
Traveled extensively on private jets when not using royal planes, and lived lavishly. Questions about the source of his wealth persisted. Some came from wealthy friends, others likely from deals shrouded in opacity. Many suspected he was being bought for access, influence, or both. Security concerns only added to the alarm. Reports later suggested that Andrew had connections with individuals who were later accused of spying for China. One businessman with close access to him was reportedly banned from entering the UK by MI5 over national security concerns. Even with repeated warnings, Andrew continued the relationship, apparently indifferent to the risks it posed.
Advisors around the royal family felt that she was an unsuitable figure for Andrew to be seen with.
Intelligence officials reportedly worried that his vanity and financial habits made him vulnerable to manipulation by foreign powers. Former royal staff offered a strikingly consistent view of his character. They described him as entitled and arrogant, dismissive of subordinates, and prone to outbursts when challenged. One protection officer called him demanding and rude, while others pointed to his casual disregard for the rules that governed everyone else. The picture that emerges is of someone who believed his status placed him above scrutiny and consequence. The portrait is clear: a man who believed his royal status made him untouchable, free to associate with anyone, accept any benefit, and behave without consequence. Questionable friends, opaque finances, arrogant behavior, dismissive attitude toward advice, all of it was visible to anyone paying attention. The Epstein scandal didn't arrive in a vacuum. It was the inevitable outcome of decades in which Andrew acted as though rules and consequences simply did not apply to him. The accumulation of scandals eventually forced the monarchy's hand in an unprecedented way. Stripped bare. In January 2022, the British monarchy faced a moment unlike anything seen in modern history. Queen Elizabeth II, Andrew's mother, and the woman who had shielded him through decades of scandal, took a decisive and final step. In a brief official statement, she stripped Andrew of every military role, every royal patronage, and every honorary title he had accumulated over 6 decades. He was no longer to be addressed as His Royal Highness in official contexts. Technically still in the line of succession, he was effectively reduced to a private citizen. This was not a suspension or temporary measure. It was a permanent disgrace, the monarchy's ultimate sanction short of complete exile. The Queen, who had defended Andrew through the Epstein revelations, the Newsnight disaster, and relentless public scrutiny, determined that his continued formal presence posed too great a risk to the institution. The timing is telling. Weeks earlier, Andrew had settled Virginia Giuffre's lawsuit for around £12 million. The settlement included no admission of wrongdoing, but Andrew expressed regret for his association with Epstein and acknowledged Giuffre's courage. For the Queen and her advisors, the settlement transformed theoretical controversy into tangible legal and financial liability. Questions quickly emerged about where the settlement money had come from. Andrew had no official income, and reports suggested that either the Queen or Prince Charles may have contributed. Buckingham Palace declined to comment, calling it a private family matter. The lack of clarity only fueled speculation that the monarchy was quietly supporting him financially, even while publicly distancing itself from his scandal. Family tensions deepened. King Charles III, then Prince of Wales, reportedly grew increasingly frustrated. Charles was focused on creating a leaner, more disciplined institution centered on core working royals, and Andrew's behavior directly conflicted with that vision. Prince William's reaction was even more intense. Insiders described him as incandescent with anger. To William, Andrew symbolized everything wrong with old royal entitlement: reckless behavior, tone-deaf public statements, and a belief that rank and privilege could shield him from consequences. William reportedly pushed for the strictest possible measures, insisting that Andrew be entirely separated from official royal duties. The consequences played out visibly. At Queen Elizabeth II's funeral in September 2022, Andrew wore civilian clothes while his siblings appeared in full military uniform, a stark visual that broadcast his fall from favor to billions worldwide. At King Charles III's coronation in May 2023, Andrew's presence was minimal and tightly managed, reduced to the bare minimum required by family connection, carefully kept out of the public eye. Reputational damage continued to mount. In 2024, court documents surfaced containing Johanna Sjoberg's sworn testimony alleging that Andrew groped her in 2001 at Epstein's Manhattan mansion. The revelations reignited public outrage and reinforced the permanent stain on his public standing. While UK authorities decided not to open an investigation, Andrew's public standing had already suffered permanent harm. Any public appearance now triggers protests, mockery, and renewed scrutiny. Today, Andrew lives in effective isolation at Royal Lodge, Windsor, a property he is trying to keep while King Charles seeks to move him to smaller accommodations. He has no income, no official role, and no public function. He attends occasional private family gatherings, but his presence is carefully managed and his daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, maintained distance between their public profiles and his scandal. But how did someone who started as a genuine war hero end up here? The war hero who became the pariah. Let's go back in time, far back to 1982. Prince Andrew was just 22, flying helicopters in the Falklands War, risking his life for Britain. During one Falklands mission, HMS Invincible came under heavy attack. Andrew deliberately put himself in harm's way, acting as a decoy to draw incoming Exocet missiles away from HMS Invincible, fully aware of the mortal risk he faced. The nation took notice. For a fleeting moment, Andrew stood as a true war hero, celebrated across Britain for bravery that few could match. His courage in the Falklands earned him admiration and national pride. But that peak quickly faded. Over the following decades, unchecked privilege and entitlement began to shape his life. Influence replaced judgment, access replaced accountability, and immunity replaced responsibility. By the time his personal scandals hit the headlines, the heroism that once defined him had been almost entirely erased from public memory, buried beneath controversy, questionable choices, and a reputation in steady decline. The tabloids nicknamed him Randy Andy in the 1980s, highlighting a playboy lifestyle that included relationships with actresses like Koo Stark, models, and socialites. His reputation leaned more toward carefree charm than serious royal responsibility. When he married Sarah Ferguson in 1986, it seemed like a chance for maturity. Yet the marriage quickly became tabloid fodder. The 1992 scandal, photographs of Ferguson with financial advisor John Bryan, made international headlines, cementing their dysfunction in the public imagination. Their eventual divorce in 1996 was messy, humiliating, and widely publicized. Personal indiscretions alone were survivable. The monarchy had weathered worse. The deeper issue was structural. Andrew never developed judgment or self-awareness. As Britain's trade envoy, he had unprecedented access to world leaders, business elites, and international events, but little oversight or training to navigate them responsibly. He befriended relatives of dictators, accepted dubious property deals, and maintained relationships that raised security concerns, acting as if his royal status made him untouchable. Multiple traits converged to seal his downfall: a lack of social intelligence, entitlement nurtured by lifelong privilege, insulation from consequences, and a surrounding circle too hesitant to challenge him. Former staff consistently describe a man intolerant of disagreement, dismissive of subordinates, and convinced that birthright alone made his judgment inherently correct. The outcome is a legacy defined entirely by disgrace. His military service, genuine and courageous, is largely forgotten. Decades as a working royal, often quiet and routine, hold little weight compared to his catastrophic misjudgments. Friendship with a convicted pedophile, alleged sexual assault, the infamous Newsnight interview, and eventual permanent exile from public life. Royal historians compare Andrew's fall to previous crises: Edward VIII's abdication, Charles and Diana's divorce, even Diana's death. But those involved were defined by love, duty, or tragedy. Andrew's scandal is rooted in lying, entitlement, and moral failure, confirmed not by speculation but by his own words, legal settlements, and accumulated testimony from victims. The monarchy survived, but Andrew's story left a permanent scar. It demonstrates that in the modern era, where social media, empowered victims, and non-stop news cycles dominate, royal blood is no shield. The adage, "Never complain, never explain," now reads as arrogant concealment. Transparency has become essential. Silence now breeds suspicion and assumed guilt. Today, Prince Andrew sits at Royal Lodge, 64 years old, stripped of purpose and relevance. His name is synonymous with scandal. Though still technically ninth in line to the throne, it is a position he will never exercise in any meaningful way. He embodies wasted privilege, a cautionary example of what happens when entitlement meets accountability and loses completely. His daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, continue their lives, building careers and families independent of his shadow. King Charles advances his vision of a streamlined modern monarchy. Prince William prepares for eventual leadership. And Andrew? He remains isolated, a stark reminder of how a war hero can transform into a pariah, how a prince can throw away everything, and how some reputations, once destroyed, can never be rebuilt. The fake DNA stories and tabloid fabrications required no truth to gain traction. The reality of Andrew's fall was already devastating. A man who once inspired national pride now exists only as a lesson. Privilege offers opportunity, but when misused, it guarantees consequence. Was he badly raised, or was rebellion not put in check early? Could Prince Andrew ever rebuild his reputation, or is his fall from grace permanent? Let us know what you think. Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.